The muscle car wars of the 60s gave us legends, but by 1999, that war was over. Dodge had nothing. Chevy was pulling the plug on its icons, and even the Mustang was limping along, humiliated and outdated. It seemed like the age of muscle was finished. Nobody expected to see big, powerful V8s again. Yet just 20 years later, you could walk into a dealership and buy an 800 horsepower Hellcat or a 760 horsepower Shelby GT500 right off the lot. And it all traces back to one unlikely Mustang, a desperate project that no one thought would succeed, but somehow did. The coffin was nearly shut until that car turned the end into the beginning of something much bigger and reignited the war that defined the next 2 decades of American muscle. It's the year 1999, and the big 3 American automakers are in trouble. The golden age of muscle cars is fading fast, and for the first time, it feels like the entire category might not survive. Dodge had killed off the Challenger nearly 2 decades earlier, leaving buyers with nothing but the Viper, or a rebadged Mitsubishi, if they wanted actual performance. General Motors wasn't doing much better. The Camaro and Firebird were once icons of the street, but sales had been declining for years. By the turn of the century, GM decided to cut its losses, kill both cars, and shift resources towards the SUV boom. They even paid over $250 million to shut down the plant that built them, an eye-watering cost that shows just how convinced they were that pony cars no longer had a future. That left the Mustang standing alone, but it wasn't thriving. Sure, it sold in higher numbers than the Camaro and Firebird, but those GM cars packed something Ford couldn't match: the legendary LS1. Ford's counterpunch was the SVT Cobra, a high-performance Mustang meant to reclaim dominance. Instead, it became a disaster. On paper, the 1999 Cobra promised 320 horsepower. In reality, dyno runs exposed the truth. Most cars were barely making 285 horsepower. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Ford ordered a stop sale, recalled every Cobra, and rushed out fixes. New intake manifolds, computer reprograms, and exhaust changes, just to deliver the numbers they'd originally promised. But the damage was already done. The Cobra was cancelled outright for the year 2000, with only 300 stripped-down Cobra Rs built as a stopgap. When the nameplate returned in 2001, sales barely cleared 7,000 units. By 2002, the Cobra disappeared again, and so at the dawn of the new millennium, the Camaro and Firebird were dead. Dodge had long since abandoned the fight, and Ford found itself humiliated. The Mustang was still soldiering on with the Fox body chassis, revolutionary back in 1978, but hopelessly dated by 2000. Many inside and outside the company believed it was time to put the Mustang out to pasture, shelve the Cobra entirely, and wait for the clean sheet redesign already penciled in for 2005. The idea of reviving the Cobra seemed pointless, even reckless, but John refused to let it die. John Coletti was the head of Ford's special vehicle team, SVT, and he already had a reputation with the Mustang. His biggest win so far? Saving it from becoming the front-wheel drive probe. If that had been his crowning achievement, he could have retired a hero. But Coletti wasn't the type to rest on past victories. He was old school. He hated excuses, hated compromise, and above all, he hated being embarrassed. And that 1999 Cobra fiasco, that hit him personally. In 2001, Coletti and his team hit the road to evaluate 2 upcoming cars, the Focus SVT and 2002 Cobra. When Coletti finally slid behind the wheel of the Cobra, his blood boiled. The car could barely edge out last year's model, and worse, it couldn't even keep up with the Focus. Imagine that, the Mustang's flagship performance trim, humbled by a hopped-up economy car. Coletti was livid. He ordered everyone to pull over at the next gas station and staged an impromptu performance review on the spot. People made their cases, pointing out strengths and weaknesses, but his mind was already made up. With the sting of the 99 debacle still hanging over the brand, Coletti pulled the plug. The 2002 Cobra was dead, but canceling the car wasn't enough. When the road trip was over, Coletti called his team together. His message was clear. If Ford was gonna build another Cobra, it couldn't just be good. It had to be a monster. So powerful and so unshakable that no one would ever doubt Ford's muscle car supremacy again. And with that, the work began. The first order of business was simple. Build an engine that could decimate. The team even gave it a name, Terminator, because their goal was literally to terminate the competition. Coletti knew that to make the kind of power they needed, it couldn't just be some fragile one-off design. This had to be a mass-produced Mustang V8 that could reliably take abuse. And to get there, he decided to do something no Mustang Cobra had done before, add forced induction. The choice was an Eaton M112 supercharger, just over 1.8 liters, paired with a water-to-air intercooler to keep intake temps under control. But building a legend was never as simple as bolting on a blower and calling it done. The first roadblock was the engine block itself. Up to that point, the Cobra had relied on the aluminum Tech Skid block, an Italian casting that was light, strong, and perfectly fine for naturally aspirated V8. But once you forced air through a supercharger, the game changed. Cylinder pressures spiked, and the added stress from the blower drive pushed the block right to its limits. Ford's engineers ran the numbers, and the results were clear. The aluminum design would need major re-engineering, thicker walls, new tooling, which meant more money and more time than they had. As their own SAE paper later admitted, the block analysis showed that production cast iron block would be preferred. It was heavier, yes, but stronger, safer, and proven. For a car meant to handle boost, abuse, and endless modification, iron was the foundation they could trust. With that sorted, they went back to testing and kept blowing up engines. The 01 Cobra had a forged crank but weak pistons, so Ford added forged pistons. Still, the rods couldn't take the boost and they kept snapping. They needed forged rods and fast. Ford couldn't make them in time, so they turned to Manley. Their prototype rods worked beautifully, but there was a catch: cost. Ford could make a rod for about $6 a piece. Manley wanted 56. Multiply that across an entire engine run, and the costs skyrocketed. Executives were furious. Spending that much per part on a low production Mustang seemed insane. But Coletti refused to back down. He fought tooth and nail in the boardroom, and in the end, he won. By the time development wrapped, the team had blown up 8 engines, but what they had left was worth every bit of struggle. With the motor finally bulletproof, they turned to the rest of the car. The standard Mustang 5-speed wasn't going to cut it, so SVT went bigger. The Tremec T56 6-speed, the same gearbox found in the Dodge Viper and the Chevrolet Corvette. It was built to handle serious power. Around it, they beefed up nearly every driveline component. Larger drive shafts, stronger half shafts, reinforced U-joints, all to make sure the Cobra could take drag strip launches over and over again. But Coletti's team didn't want this car to be a one-trick pony. They carried over the Cobra's independent rear suspension, then made it tougher with a new differential brace to fight wheel hop. Bilstein monotube shocks, borrowed from the Cobra R, were added, along with stiffer front springs and beefier roll bar to balance out the extra weight from the iron block and supercharger. The result was more than just a Mustang with a big motor. It was a machine built to handle the strip, the street, and the track, all while rewriting the rulebook for American muscle. Finally, they had done it. Against all odds, Coletti and his team had pulled off what seemed impossible. John himself admitted he never thought the project would see the light of day, but it did. And when it hit the streets, people loved it. Magazines hailed it as a true tribute to the classic muscle car and declared it more than redemption for the fiasco of the earlier Cobra. The public agreed. The 2003 model became the best-selling Cobra ever. Motor Trend summed it up perfectly. Unless you were in a Viper or a Corvette Z06, you better watch out. Ford was so impressed that they immediately handed Coletti his next assignment, lead development of the all-new Ford GT. But the Terminator's impact didn't stop there. This car planted a flag in the ground. Supercharged, high-horsepower Mustangs weren't just possible, they were here to stay. The buzz it created helped build anticipation for the all-new Mustang redesign in 2005, and it forced Dodge and GM to respond. Within a few years, both brands resurrected their beloved pony cars to rejoin the fight. And what a fight it turned into. Over the last 2 decades, we've seen some of the wildest factory muscle cars ever imagined. Dodge brought us the Hellcat, and then went even further with the Red Eye. Chevy built the Camaro ZL1 1LE, a track monster capable of embarrassing supercars. Ford rolled out new Shelbys, culminating in the 760 horsepower GT500. At the peak of this era, around 2020, you could walk into a dealership and choose between a Hellcat Red Eye, a ZL1 1LE, or a Shelby GT500. That kind of horsepower war hadn't been seen since the golden age of the 60s. The ripple effects spread even further. Dodge spun its supercharged engines into the Jeep Trackhawk, the Durango Hellcat, and even the Ram TRX. Insanity became normal. And while today emissions regulations and electrification have once again silenced the Camaro and Challenger, we can trace that whole modern run, the last great era of muscle, back to one car. Without the Terminator Cobra, there would have been no Hellcat, no ZL1 1LE, no Shelby GT500 arms race. It proved there was still a market for outrageous horsepower, and it forced the competition to deliver. For enthusiasts, that competition was a gift. In the year 2000, it looked like the muscle car was dead, but in 2003, the Terminator Cobra rewrote the script. It didn't just save the Mustang, it saved the muscle car itself.